The microphone was still hot between us, our voices having danced around each other for hours. Clay leaned back in his chair, eyes locked on mine through the dim studio lighting. "You know," he said, his voice dropping to that intimate register, that made my skin tingle. "We could keep this conversation going off the air." I felt my pulse quicken as I reached across the console, my fingers brushing his wrist. The marathon was supposed to end at midnight, but something told me our night was just beginning. Hey, if you're enjoying this intimate confession, take a second to like and subscribe. Your support means everything, and trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. The podcast marathon had been Clay's idea. 12 hours of back-to-back interviews with content creators, building towards something he called the most authentic conversations you'll ever hear. I'd signed up thinking it would be good exposure for my own show, but sitting across from him in that cramped studio, surrounded by the soft glow of recording equipment, I realized I hadn't anticipated the man himself. Clay was different from the usual podcast bros I'd encountered. At 33, he carried himself with quiet confidence, his voice rich and measured in a way that made even mundane topics sound fascinating. When he'd introduced me to the late-night slot, 11 p.m. to midnight, his fingers had lingered on my shoulder just a moment too long, and I'd felt something electric pass between us. "So, Lynn," he said as we settled into our chairs, the red recording light casting shadows across his features. "Tell me about the stories you don't usually share on your show." I laughed, adjusting my headphones. "You want the real confessions? Huh? Always." His eyes never left mine as he leaned forward slightly. "That's what makes good content. The truth people are afraid to say out loud." The hour flew by in a blur of intimate conversation. We talked about vulnerability, about the masks we wear online versus who we really are when the cameras stop rolling. Clay had a way of asking questions that made me want to bare my soul, his voice wrapping around me like warm silk. "You know, what I think," I found myself saying as we neared the end of our scheduled time. "I think people are starving for real connection. All this digital intimacy, but when's the last time someone actually looked at you, really looked, and saw who you are underneath?" Clay's hand moved to the console, fingers hovering over the controls. "And what would they see if they looked at you that way, Lynn?" The question hung between us, loaded with possibility. I felt my breath catch as I met his gaze, something shifting in the air around us. "I guess you'd have to look to find out." He reached over and switched off the recording equipment, the red lights fading to black. "Marathon's officially over," he said quietly. "But I'm not ready for this conversation to end." I stood from my chair, suddenly aware of how small the studio felt, how close we were in the dim light. "What did you have in mind?" Clay rose too, moving around the console until he was standing directly in front of me. "I was thinking we could continue this discussion, off the record." His hand found my waist, fingers spreading warm against the fabric of my dress. I felt myself leaning into his touch, my body responding before my mind could catch up. "Clay, tell me to stop," he whispered, his other hand coming up to cut my face. "Tell me this is just professional networking and I'll back away right now." Instead of answering, I closed the distance between us, my lips finding his in a kiss that felt like falling and flying at the same time. He tasted like coffee and something darker, more dangerous. His arms wrapped around me, pulling me closer as the kiss deepened, months of professional restraint dissolving in an instant. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Clay's forehead rested against mine. "I've been wanting to do that since the first time I heard your voice," he admitted. "Why didn't you?" I asked, my fingers playing with the collar of his shirt, "because I wanted to be sure you felt it too." His thumb traced along my jawline. "This thing between us, it's not just the late-night energy talking, is it?" I shook my head, suddenly feeling bold in a way that surprised me. "Show me what else you've been thinking about." Clay's eyes darkened at my words. He glanced around the studio, then moved to lock the door, the soft click echoing in the quiet space. When he turned back to me, there was something predatory in his movements, like he was finally allowing himself to want what he'd been holding back. "You sure about this?" he asked, approaching slowly. "Because once we cross this line, I'm sure," I breathed, reaching for him. This time when our lips met, there was no hesitation. Clay's hands roamed over my body with purpose, fingers finding the zipper at the back of my dress and slowly drawing it down. The fabric whispered to the floor, pooling at my feet as cool air kissed my exposed skin. "Beautiful," he murmured against my neck, his lips trailing along my throat. Even more than I imagined. I fumbled with the buttons of his shirt, desperate to feel skin against skin. When I finally pushed the fabric off his shoulders, revealing the broad expanse of his chest, I couldn't help but run my hands over the firm muscles, feeling his sharp intake of breath at my touch. Clay lifted me easily, setting me on the edge of the console. The equipment buttons pressed against my back as he positioned himself between my legs, his hands gripping my thighs. "Is this okay?" he asked, voice rough with restraint. "More than okay," I whispered, pulling him down for another kiss. His mouth worked its way down my body with deliberate slowness, each kiss sending sparks through my nervous system. When he reached the delicate fabric at my hips, he looked up at me through dark lashes, a silent question in his eyes. I nodded, and he carefully removed the last barrier between us, his breath warm against my exposed skin. The first touch of his lips made me gasp, my hands flying to grip his hair as sensation flooded through me. Clay took his time, his movements unhurried and thorough. Every stroke of his tongue was calculated to drive me higher, his hands holding me steady as my body began to tremble. The studio around us faded away until there was nothing but the building pressure and the man between my legs who seemed determined to unravel me completely. "Clay," I gasped, my hips moving involuntarily against his mouth. "Please." He hummed against me, the vibration sending another wave of heat through my core. His rhythm never faltered, building me towards something that felt both inevitable and impossible. When his lips focused on that most sensitive spot, applying just the right amount of pressure, I felt myself shatter. The climax rolled through me in waves, my back arching as I cried out his name. Clay held me through it, his mouth gentling, but never stopping until the last tremor faded from my body. When I finally came back to myself, he was kissing his way back up my body, his eyes bright with satisfaction and desire. "You taste incredible," he murmured against my lips, and I could taste myself there. Salt and sweetness mixed with his own flavor. My hands found his belt, fingers working to free him from the confines of his clothing. When I finally wrapped my fingers around his length, he groaned low in his throat, his forehead dropping to my shoulder. "Lynn," he breathed, "if we don't slow down, I'm not going to last long." "Good," I whispered, guiding him toward my entrance. "I want to feel you lose control." Clay's eyes met mine as he pressed forward slowly, both of us gasping at the sensation of joining. He filled me completely, stretching me in the most delicious way as my body adjusted to accommodate him. "You feel perfect," he said, voice strained with the effort of holding still. "Like you were made for me." I rolled my hips experimentally, drawing a sharp breath from both of us. "Then show me what that means." Clay began to move then, each thrust deliberate and deep. The console creaked beneath us as we found our rhythm, the sound mixing with our breathing and the soft sounds of pleasure that neither of us could contain. His hands gripped my hips, angling me so that each movement hit exactly where I needed it most. I wrapped my legs around his waist, pulling him deeper, desperate for more connection, more friction, more of everything he was giving me. "That's it," he murmured, his pace increasing. "Let me hear you." I didn't hold back, my voice echoing off the studio walls as he drove me toward another peak. The intensity built between us, our movements becoming more urgent as we chased release together. When my second climax hit, it was even more powerful than the first, my entire body clenching, around him as pleasure crashed over me in waves. Clay followed seconds later, his rhythm faltering as he poured himself into me with a groan that seemed to come from his very soul. We stayed connected for long moments afterward, both of us breathing hard as we came down from the high. Clay's hand stroked my back gently, his lips pressing soft kisses to my shoulder. "That was," I started, then trailed off, not sure how to finish. "Incredible," he supplied, pulling back to look at me. "Absolutely incredible." I smiled, suddenly feeling shy despite what we'd just shared. "So what happens now?" Clay's thumb traced along my cheek. "Now we figure out if this was just one amazing night or the beginning of something more." As we slowly disentangled ourselves and began gathering our scattered clothes, I caught sight of the recording equipment. A thought struck me, and I moved closer to check the console. "Clay," I said, my voice strange, "the backup recorder, it's still running." He looked up from where he was buttoning his shirt, eyes widening. "What?" I pointed to a small device I hadn't noticed earlier, its red light blinking steadily. "This whole thing, our conversation, everything that happened after, it's all been recorded." Clay moved quickly to the equipment, checking the settings. "I thought I turned everything off," he said, running a hand through his hair. "The main system is down, but this backup must have been set to record the entire marathon." We stared at each other, the implications hanging heavy between us. Hours of intimate conversation followed by our passionate encounter, all captured in digital clarity. "What do we do?" I asked. Clay's fingers hovered over the delete button, then stopped. "That's up to you," he said quietly. "It's your choice." I looked at the device, then at Clay, remembering his words from earlier about authentic content and the truth people are afraid to say out loud. Something about the night felt too important to simply erase, as if deleting it would make it less real somehow. "Keep it," I said finally. "But password protect it. This stays between us unless we both decide otherwise. Clay nodded, his fingers working to secure the file. Are you sure? I'm sure, I said, moving closer to him. Besides, maybe someday we'll want to remember exactly how this all started. He wrapped his arms around me, pulling me close. Think we'll need a recording to remember this? I laughed, feeling lighter somehow. No, but it might be fun to listen to when we're old and gray. When we're old and gray? Clay raised an eyebrow. That sounds like you're planning to keep me around for a while. Maybe I am, I admitted, surprised by my own boldness. If you're interested in being kept. Instead of answering with words, Clay kissed me again, soft and sweet this time, full of promise rather than urgency. When we broke apart, he rested his forehead against mine. I think I could get used to this kind of marathon, he murmured. The morning sun was beginning to filter through the studio windows as we finally prepared to leave. Clay walked me to my car, his hand warm in mine as we navigated the empty parking lot. So, he said as we reached my door, dinner tomorrow? Somewhere with actual food and maybe fewer microphones? I smiled, feeling giddy in a way I hadn't experienced in years. It's a date. Good, he said, opening my car door for me. Because I have a feeling we're just getting started. As I drove home through the quiet city streets, I couldn't stop thinking about the night behind me and the possibilities ahead. The recording device had captured more than just our voices. It had captured the moment everything changed between us. My phone buzzed with a text from Clay. Sweet dreams, beautiful. Can't wait to hear your voice again tomorrow. I smiled, already, missing him despite having just left his side. Whatever this thing between us was, it felt real in a way that transcended the digital connections I'd grown used to. This was authentic in the way Clay had talked about, raw, unfiltered, honest. The secret we now shared felt less like a burden and more like a promise. Somewhere in that studio, locked away behind passwords and security, was proof of the night that changed everything. Evidence of the moment when two people stopped performing and started being real with each other. As I pulled into my driveway, I caught myself humming softly, my body still humming with the memory of Clay's touch. Tomorrow couldn't come fast enough. But first, I had some decisions to make. The recording existed, a digital testament to our passion, and with it came possibilities I'd never considered before. Clay had given me the choice, but I was beginning to realize that some choices change everything, and maybe that's exactly what I needed. What would you do if you discovered the most intimate moment of your life had been accidentally recorded? Would you delete it or keep it as a reminder of when everything changed? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one and want to know your thoughts. And if this story sparked something in you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. Trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming next. Thanks for listening to my confession.